Welcome to Intersections. Today, I'd like to introduce you to two people who are well known at St. John's Citadel and have been well known here for many, many years now. Dennis and Ivy Burt, and we're going to find out more about their association with the Citadel as we speak in the next few minutes. So Dennis and Ivy, I've known you for a long, long time, longer than either of us would care to remember, perhaps.
1972.
Wow, that's a long time ago, Dennis. So give our listeners who aren't privy to that, give our listeners a thumbnail sketch of your early years. I know, Ivy, you're from Corner Brook. Dennis is from that great metropolis of Gambo. And so take us back to that point in your life. What was life like? What was your family life, your siblings, all that? What interests did you have? What activities were you involved in? And what function did church play in all of that for you? So let's start with you, Ivy.
Well, Derek, I grew up in Corner Brook Temple, and I guess I was born Salvation Army. My parents attended the Salvation Army. So as a child, I was involved in all the activities that were available in the Corps, and it was a very active and very busy Corps. And I guess there was a lot of influences in my life as a result of being involved in that Corps. And in my family, my parents were always, sure that we, got to the Corps, that we attended, that we were involved in what there was to be involved in, and supported us in our involvement. Both my parents, my father later in life committed his life to the Lord. My mother was a Christian all my life, and she was a very committed Christian, and I would say had a great influence on my life. And then people in the Corps who were very interested in us, in the YP Corps, and people who provided leadership. And as I grew and into the songsters and whatever, I left home, at 18 to come to Memorial University. But my brother and I often speak about it and say that we were very blessed because we had a good home, good parents who brought us up in the ways that, helped us to be successful in our lives, made sure that we understood the faith experience, and, we are very grateful for that.
Good, thank you. Dennis, how about you?
You mentioned earlier I grew up in the big metropolis of Gambo. Well, I'll go back a bit further. My birth town is the even bigger metropolis of Greenspan. And when I was 3 years old, we moved to Gambo. And we were actively involved in Gambo Corps. I guess Mom probably dropped us off at the Citadel on the way to our new house. I don't know, but we grew up in the Corps. And I was involved with YP band, senior band, scouts, sing company, Corps cadets. And the joke in our family, Ivy and I know, if we do some charitable thing, I always look at her and say, how many points do I get from your Corps cadet paper?
And you have to be a certain age to know what that's all about.
You got to be a certain age to know
Absolutely.
that, right? Yeah, dozen muffins is worth at least 2 points on your Corps cadet paper.
Yeah.
So then, in 1972, I went to university. And I always tell people say, what do you do in university? And I said, I did two things. I spent some of my parents' money, and I met a wonderful woman that was foolish enough to marry me. But I'm never sure what the sequence was. But,
So your siblings, you weren't by yourself. You had
four sisters.
4 sisters.
2 older and 2 younger.
Wow.
I like to think that I was a rose between 4 thorns. But they've been known to put it a different way.
They've corrected you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
the interesting thing that you've both given me the segue to is 1972, 18-ish, right? So talk about how you two met.
I met Ivy at the Education Caf.
4th floor.
4th floor. Totally fascinated with her. And I did ask the young man who was now part of our Corps, but we wished to remain nameless, who she was. And he told me, she was Ivy Sharp from Corner Brook. And I was so fascinated with her. I used to follow her to class, walk her to class. And my class probably the other part of the campus. And she'd say to me, do you have a class? My class is next floor down. Oh, very good. So I'd bum around and wait till she got out of class, and conveniently my class ended 5 minutes before hers. and I go up to whatever floor and meet up with her and walk her to her next class.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
after about a year, I got up the nerve to ask her out, and she asked me why it took so long. And I got that year last time. I was trying to make up for it.
So, Ivy, what's your recollection of that? let's
Funny, not as nice as mine.
let's cut to the truth now.
I didn't realize I was being stalked in the tunnels at Memorial at the time. But, you know, we did meet at university, and Dennis left university and went to Labrador City to work.
That's right.
And I stayed on and I finished my degree in social work. And at the time that I graduated, there was a job available in the hospital for a social worker. And I applied for the job and I was successful, so I graduated from university and I went to Labrador City, and we spent a year and a half there together before we were married, and eventually found our way back to Lovertown, which is where we started our married life.
That's interesting. That's a piece that's now coming into focus for me. I knew Dennis was in Labrador City because we were there at the same time.
That's right, yeah.
But I had left by the time you had come. And so that piece was a missing little piece for me. And I do remember the Lovertown piece because if I recall, you were in social work and you had gone into business.
Yep.
Right? And so that's the little missing link for me.
Well, I've always been described as a missing link.
Have you?
Yes.
I don't have any idea why that would be. But let's just back up. You met in St. John's, whether it was the CAF and the education building or the incessant roamings of the tunnels or whatever they were. But St. John's Citadel also played a function in that because I think that's where you both gravitated. Is that's correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so talk about Dennis coming, other than Ivy, because we take that as being a major motivator in your life, right?
Big step.
So other than that, you arrived on the steps of the old Citadel out here on Adams Avenue, and you found your way to become involved here.
Well, back then I was just in the congregation.
Okay.
I wasn't in the band or anything like that. And and then when we moved back here in '87, I guess,
Okay.
I started playing in the band.
Okay.
And I spent a couple 3 years as YP band leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I stepped out of the band, I was actively involved, as I am now, in ushers and greeters and that kind of stuff.
Great.
Yeah.
And so Ivy, similar with you, I guess. It was 1987. You moved back here. You're now married by this time, and so
We're
the
parents.
Citadel. Yes, and your parents. And so the Citadel was the place where you chose, right? It's what you knew before, and now here you are. So talk about your early involvement here in this Corps, if you would, because you know, for those of us that are familiar with you and with the Citadel over the course of time, probably remember you best as a long-term sergeant major here, but there was stuff before that. So can you fill in that blank for us?
Well, my first encounter with the Citadel was really in 1973 when I came to Memorial to attend university. And I boarded with a member of the congregation, so that was, you know, and they were very keen that I be involved. And I actually sang the songsters, which a lot of people wouldn't remember, and you wouldn't want me singing the songsters now, I guarantee you. And I taught Sunday school, and I was highly involved on campus with the Students' Fellowship. Then left to go, as I said, to Labrador City and then on to Lovertown. And we came back here, as Dennis said, in 1987, and we came to the Corps on a Sunday morning and attended the service. And the next day, Colonel Wayne Pritchard, who was then the Corps officer, called Dennis, and he would have known Dennis, and said, "Dennis, I am the service. You know, there's a place for you and your family at St. John's Citadel." Consequently, we came back. We made the Citadel our home Corps. I became involved almost immediately in the YP Corps teaching Sunday school, and we did a little bit of work with Youth Fellowship Ministries and provided leadership. And then eventually I moved on to a role that was then known as the Youth Ministries Coordinator, which was formerly what we would call the Young People Sergeant Major. And I did that for 3 years, and my intention was to do it for no more than 5, and I was quite happy doing that role. And one day, Major Brian Peddle, who was then our Corps officer, General Peddle, called me in and said, "I need to chat to you." I still didn't clue in to what he was wanting to chat to me about, but it was about taking on the role of Corps Sergeant Major. And I guess I had to do that with a lot of thought and a lot of prayer. And I remember it was an Easter Sunday, and I hadn't shared with very many people, probably only Dennis, that I was asked to assume that role. And I've already alluded to my mother, who was a wonderful Christian woman, a great encourager. And so I said to her on Good Friday, I said, Mom, I've been asked to be Corps Sergeant Major at the Citadel. I had to make a decision. And I guess she affirmed me, and she said, you could do that job. So I accepted the position, and I actually was Corps Sergeant Major for 13 years. And really enjoyed that role, and came to know a lot of people here at the Citadel, and to have a lot of opportunities in ministry through that role.
Good. You used a term that some of us would have some longevity in the Salvation Army would understand, but others may not. SASF. Salvation Army Students Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
The three of us were part of that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit, if you could, about what that group, what the mission of that group, what the intent of that group, what that meant to you as someone coming in from Corner Brook, Gambo. What was it about that group? Was it that meant something to you? Can you talk a little bit about that, Dennis?
Well, I think the big part about SASF is it gives you an immediate connection from the comfort and the warmth of your own fellowship in rural Newfoundland. You come into the big city, and it's very easy to get lost in the big city. But SASF gave you that connection.
Great.
And you got to see people of similar interests, similar faith, and never a Sunday morning on the way to church that we drive along by the Beehive.
The Beehive.
On the corner of Stamps Lane and Pennywell Road.
That's right.
That was where four of the ladies lived.
With surnames that began with B.
That's right. And so we'd, last night you meet there, and to this day, it's kind of a landmark
It is.
for Salvation students
Yep.
who back in that day
Yep.
had that connection.
Yeah. What about you, Ivy? Similar?
Well, I think Dennis has said, that gave you a connection, a place. The campus can be a big place. There's lots of things to take your attention, but I think it helps you to focus, as a focus, and help you to focus on your faith. I made a lot of friendships that over the years, we've continued to connect with people or see people. A couple times that some of that group have got together, So I think it was really important, and it was a chaplain on campus with an office, so there was always a place to go and a support for students who needed that, and I think it was a very important part of coming to university, and I certainly appreciate the fact that the chaplaincy on campus, and I think a lot of people benefited from it.
My own recollection, just to add to what you two have brought to the table on that, is one highlight of the year was the SASF retreat.
Yeah.
Because that gave us an opportunity to pull away from all the other stuff, go to Clarenville or Bay Roberts, wherever it was we ended up for the retreat, and focus on spiritual things. It gave us that opportunity. Yes, there was the social element, there was all of that, but there was always a guest, somebody who brought the focus very acutely to faith, right? And so I believe that has helped to equip countless young people of the day, older folk now, to help them deal with and to understand and find the right role of faith in their life as they went forward. So that's just what I would put on the table with that whole SASF thing. So let's talk a little bit about faith in the trenches. Okay, Dennis, you've been in, when I knew you in Lab City, you were working with, I think, the Iron Ore Company of Canada or some affiliate.
One of the contractors.
And, that's a whole different milieu, right? I mean, that's a in-your-face, rough and tumble sometimes, and
very much so.
kind of circumstance. You've later gone on to run your own business in places, and then you've moved into the construction thing yourself over a period of time. And Ivy, in your case, you know, it's been employment through a government agency and social work, and then more laterally now at the School of Social Work at Memorial. Talk a little, if you will, about faith, your faith in the workplace, and your interaction with coworkers, and the ability or the challenges of living a faith-based life in that kind of context. I'll start with you.
Well, I guess it's always challenging to share our faith. Maybe not quite as challenging to live it out sometimes. You know, in the workplace you encounter many different people. And I guess the attitude that you bring and the way that you react to people, I think sometimes can be reflected or is reflected in your own faith and how you approach things. And sometimes you encounter situations like in social work where very difficult decisions had to be made. So I guess being thoughtful and diligent in your work and you know, demonstrating to people that you really do care about people and that is part of your faith relationship. You know, while it is important to speak about your faith, it's not always an opportunity to do so. So you have to live it out as an example to people, as opposed to maybe the opportunity to witness. But sometimes those opportunities do arise. And I think to be an encourager and to show gratitude and to you know, do what you can to make things work in a workplace. I think people soon realize that maybe there's something a little bit of difference about this person, and then that might open the door sometimes for you to say that word or whatever, and to speak to your faith in a real concrete kind of way, right? So I think it's very important that we remember who we are and who we represent and who we want to be Christ-like, you know, in our workplace, and of course everywhere, right?
Absolutely. Thanks. Dennis? Like yours is a very different experience than Ivy's, right?
Yeah.
So,
I'm more rough and tumble.
hey,
I grew up in a home where I've always said my mother was a saint. And I probably was one of the people that's a driving force between her sainthood being materialized. But my father got saved later in life. Mom raised a family, worked away. But my mother was never a person. Mom didn't wear her evidence of faith on her shoulder. Mom lived her faith. To the day she died, Mom lived her faith. And consequently, for us, it became a way of life, you know. Mother had great faith, and, you know, on many a time growing up, I heard Mom pray, and it was from her heart. And so I think for me, the counseling that Mom gave us by living her life the way she did is what, from a faith point of view, has brought me to this point through the years. You know, Mom has been passed away now 10 or 12 years. And I still vividly remember her life and her prayers and the way she conducted her affairs. And it's interesting. Faith is not something that I live like that. I don't hammer people about it. I always say nobody's ever been browbeat into heaven by beating them with a Bible. And one of my favorite expressions that I use is, yeah, and we've all heard it. Some of you, you're parting company with somebody, they'll say, God love you. And my answer usually is, yeah, and he loves you too. And sometimes I'll get an answer, is there a sermon here? Can be if you want one, you know, but that's what I say, and he loves you too. And I just feel for me, that's kind of a way to express my
you've raised an interesting point. Some people approach, particularly in the evangelical church, approach this whole notion of witnessing or living out your faith, however you want to describe it, almost as, and you know, if this is what is good for somebody, that's good for them. It may not be good for me, but let me articulate it. It's this constant, I want to tell you, I want to tell you, as opposed to the other part of evangelism that over the years sort of seeped into life, the idea of lifestyle evangelism, showing you, not, to use your term, browbeating you into heaven, but the idea of my example, that maybe I'm motivated by a different source that might pique an interest in you, to go back to something you just said, Ivy, is more attractive to another group of folks who may be searching for that meaning in their lives. They don't want to be hung up and pasted, but they do. They have an interest, and something gets tweaked in them that prompts them to say, well, "What is it that's different about you? Why did you react that way when everybody else reacted this way?" That kind of thing. It gives, as you said, provides an opportunity for you to take that into a little different level than as if somebody was sort of nailing you all the time about, don't go to church, what's wrong with you, right? Unfortunately or fortunately, the fact of the matter is the march of time keeps going, and those of us who knew each other when we were spring chickens
Now
no longer spring chickens. A little bit grayer. And, hopefully there's some wisdom that has come through experiences of life, probably some buffing of edges that, when you're a young teenager and young adult, you're there and it's right and we're going to do this. Maybe now there's a bit more mellowing in some of us along the way. So you're at a different stage of life as a lot of us are. Families raised, your work is either done or it's by choice at this stage. Health challenges come and go to all of us. And so let me ask you this. At this different stage of your life now, how do you keep your faith experience fresh? How do you keep your faith experience
In my
fresh?
case, I keep my faith fresh because I got a great wife who chastises me. I shouldn't say that. But I know, like sometimes we're debating and I want to talk to somebody about whatever issue, and I'll say to Ivy, I think when I see him I'm going to say, and I'll tell her what I'm going to say. And her answer is, no, my love, that's not what you're going to say. And when she tells me what I'm going to say, it's completely different from what I was going to say. So she buffers the edges on me, and I still got edges.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That need to be buffered.
So how do you keep your faith life alive and meaningful?
3 years ago, I took it upon myself to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long, long time. So that is actively read the Bible. And I do it now every morning. It's my first task. I get it. Well, second task. First task, put on a pot of coffee. I sit at the dining room table and I read for, 40 minutes or so? And I'm usually up before Ivy to do that. And when she comes into the bedroom, her statement to me is, have you got your passage read? At first, when she used to say it, used to strike me so funny, right? But then I realized, of course, back in a generation before us, that was a lot what the Bible was referred to. Read a passage of Scripture, And I find, of course, the Bible is so much full of surprises, interesting things, and faith. And I'm thoroughly enjoying reading the Bible. And sometimes I find when I'm out in the public now, it broadens my situation. That if somebody brings up a subject, I'll say to them, well, it's interesting you said, in the Bible, I read it yesterday morning or the day before. I read such a thing. And most people say, well, you read the Bible? Yeah, how often? Every day. Really? And they want to know what I read and where I read and that kind of stuff, right? I don't say that's evidence of faith as much as evidence as what faith is doing for me, I suppose, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah, and usually by the time I get my passage read, I've gone through 2 cups of coffee.
There you go.
And then I go in the kitchen and make breakfast.
There you go.
So,
all right, so you begin your day.
I begin my day reading the Bible.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Ivy?
Well, I think, you referenced keeping your faith fresh, but I think our lives evolve and change. and new challenges arise, and some successes that we have. But I think, faith is a very important part. And I think Dennis referenced prayer, or referenced Bible reading. For me, I'm always conscious of my prayer life. I believe very much in prayer, and I believe that, everything that we do in our lives matters to God, and He's able to provide us with direction. So I think, ensuring that I don't forget to pray, that I'm not praying only at times when, there's something really pressing and I think I have to pray, but that I pray and that I, use prayer as an opportunity to be grateful and to glorify and praise God, and also to intercede and ask for things on behalf of myself and my family and people around me and people that I know that have needs. So I think that's very important. I think another way of keeping your faith fresh is to always have a ministry of some sort. Even though, I talked about my 13 years as Corps Sergeant Major, since I have not been Corps Sergeant Major, I always had a ministry. And I do remember in the late 80s about reaching a point in my life where at that time I was raising a family and going to university, doing a master's degree and working. And it was easy to say, I don't have time to do this. But I came to a stage in my life where I realized that I couldn't put God on one side and deal with things for His kingdom on my time, that I was on God's schedule. And I promised myself that I always would make time for ministry. So I think making time for ministry and keeping your ministry fresh is really important. And I mean, over the years, I've had some great opportunities for ministry here in this Corps and other Corps where, we've lived and worked. And also through the division here in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Salvation Army Newfoundland Division, with different projects that I've been involved in. And I also had an association for some time with Booth College. And so all these types of things, I think, making sure that you have some form of ministry is a way to keep your faith fresh as well.
Well, thank you very much for spending the time with us and sharing part of your experience with our listeners. One thing about this kind of medium is that we never know the influence that we're having beyond the interview itself. And so we're planting seeds, and we hope that God will take that and will multiply that for His purposes. So thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.